Hello friends, welcome to the fourth and final week of Your Own Image. I can't believe how fast the month of January has gone. Today is my birthday and I am so excited to spend it wrapping up this course with you. I've started with a laser printed copy of my full body selfie, and I went with laser printing this time so that if the image gets wet it won't move around. I'm not trying to manipulate it in advance this time the way we did last week. And I made several copies just in case I mess up during the cutting process, but also I'm going to use 2 copies in the finished version, and you'll see why in just a moment. So I'm getting out my trusty cutting mat and my X-Acto knife, and I'm going to painstakingly cut all the way around myself. I do think it's important for this project to involve a full body selfie, but if you're not comfortable doing that, I would recommend at least using an image that is from the waist up, and I think it would be really thematically appropriate to use one of yourself in your workspace, be that a drafting table in a studio or your kitchen table where you do all your crafting, whichever way that you get your work done. If you take an image of yourself sitting in that space, it's going to work really, really well for this project. And do make sure that at least one of your arms is visible and extended, because that's kind of the most fun part of this. So as I go along, I'm cutting away large areas of the background just to make it easier for myself to maneuver this piece of paper and get all the details of the nooks and crannies and wrinkles in my cardigan and things like that. This project is very heavy on cutting and very detailed and fussy with the cutting, so if you're more comfortable using scissors than the X-Acto knife, that is totally fine, and you should plan for that in this page. I really enjoy the amount of detail that I can get out of working with an X-Acto knife, but after about half an hour of cutting away at all these tiny little details, I do start to get cramps in my hand and my index finger starts to hurt a lot, so keep that in mind and do what's physically most comfortable for you. I do get good results from wrapping a piece of Sugru moldable plastic around the grip of my X-Acto knife or using a piece of craft foam around the grip, just to make it a little softer on my finger. All of which is to say this is just very tedious and repetitive work. So take breaks, do a lot of stretches, do what you gotta do to make sure that your body's not locking up while you're doing this, because it's supposed to be relaxing. It's not supposed to be stressful and painful. Now I have freed my selfie paper doll from the background, and I could easily just put myself on the page exactly like this, but it's a little bit static and I want to add something dynamic to this page. So I'm going to take off my arms below the elbow. Does this look like totally ridiculous and crazy what I'm doing right now? Because it's gonna look totally ridiculous and crazy, but I promise in the long run you'll understand and it'll make total sense. So to do this hinged articulated paper doll, you gotta cut just below the elbow so that you have a little extra space where that hinge is going to go. I'm getting rid of my original forearms and I'm bringing out my clone copy, and for this one I'm just cutting off my forearms and I am making that cut just above the elbow. So these areas, the elbow area of the forearms and of my full paper doll, are going to overlap, and that's where I'm going to put the grommets so that they will be able to move. Very fussy cutting again, working around my fingers and getting these hands free. And if you have very pale skin like me, you might want to adjust your selfie in your app to put a little more color into it, maybe do a color gradient overlay, so that not only is your image a little more stylized, but it'll be easier to tell the light portions of your hand apart from the light background, because depending on your printer, depending on your app, depending on how it reads color, it's going to wash out the lightest highlights in your skin. Starting the same process over here with my right arm, and I photographed myself holding something in my right hand so that I could also be holding something in the finished page. So definitely play with the arrangement of your hands and your arms when you take this selfie, and try to have your arms slightly away from your body so that they will be able to be hinged and they won't kind of be stuck to your sides. For this photo, I was actually holding my selfie stick, which worked out great because I used the remote on that to take the photo, and it's also just the right size that this picture, my hand in this picture, will be able to hold some of the objects that I'm cutting out later on. Now I have all my pieces ready, and I'm getting out my favorite hole punch, which is spring-loaded, and my set of grommets, and any hole punch that matches your grommet size is going to work great for this. Unfortunately, I can't demonstrate this next step on camera because that spring-loaded hole punch only works on a very hard surface, so I have to use it on my floor. But as you might guess from what you're seeing right now, I put a hole in the middle of the elbow area of each of those pieces, so the main paper doll and both of the forearms, and then I put a grommet through them to hold them together. And now I have a partially articulated, posable paper doll. Getting my art journal out now, and I'm going to start auditioning some collage pieces, mainly with text in the background. I just want to have a unifying background that adds some texture and pattern behind my paper doll. So I've got a page from a printmaking book, I've got one page from a dictionary. I'm going to swap in a different dictionary page in a moment, and then I'm also going to bring in a vintage library card. I didn't make this vintage library card myself. It is actually genuinely vintage. The stamps were put there in the year that they actually say they were put there. Not one of those fake vintage things, you know. Put down guidelines on my largest piece of paper, and I'm going to trim it to size. And the nice thing about working with pieces of text-covered paper in your collage is that when they're laid out vertically and horizontally, it's really easy to tell where you're supposed to put things based on which line of text they line up with. So for the gluing process, you're going to see me basically eyeballing where these pieces go, and it's all based on the closest line of text. So just a little tip to make things easier when you're working with text pieces in collage. Now, I will not be working directly onto my page yet. I will eventually put all of these pieces into my art journal, but first, this large sheet is going to act as my page and as the base for all of the collaging I'm about to do. So I'm bringing in my regular matte gel and my trusty spatula, and I'm going to lay it down on these pieces and get them set into place. And again, as I'm working on this largest piece, I can tell where to stop putting my glue down because I kept track of which line of text the edge of this dictionary page is going to line up with. I think my favorite part of working with the silicone spatula for my gluing and for even some of my painting and gessoing is that unlike paintbrushes, I can leave it to dry. I can just set it aside and forget about it for a while and still be able to clean it off and use it again. So it is the perfect tool for someone who is very forgetful and does not remember to wash her brushes enough. Now that my paper layers are down, I'm bringing in a couple light layers of gesso just to unify everything and to push it all back a little bit more into the background, especially the bolder areas like this yellowed page here. I want it to blend in a little bit better. So I'm laying down some sheer gesso again with my spatula, and I get a little bit of texture when I do that, and I really like how that looks as well. It's very distressed and a little bit shabby looking. So this time around, I'm not preparing this surface for painting. The gesso is acting as paint itself. So you don't have to worry about getting a smooth surface or very even coverage because we're not using gesso in the traditional sense. We're just using it to unify this background. And you can also choose to highlight certain areas by leaving them uncovered. So you almost get a found poetry effect sometimes if you leave certain blocks and certain words uncovered with gesso so they pop out a little bit more and add some visual interest. I'm giving this page a quick blast from my heat tool just so I can move on to the next step pretty quickly, but you can always let it air dry in between steps. I'm going to audition placement for my paper doll, and I want to leave a little bit of room on one side because I'm going to be introducing other collage elements over there. Since my right arm is the one that has the object in it, I am going to leave the room on the right side, which is to say the doll's right, our left. And also I'm going to take this doll back over to my cutting board and I'm going to cut a slot in my hand just under my thumb so that it can actually hold those objects when I have them cut out of paper as well. Now it's time to start collecting objects for your doll to have on the page, and I'm starting with my beloved and much distressed pen roll. There are a couple themes you can work with in these collections of items, and mine for this page is going to be things that I want to keep with me in 2019. And That doesn't necessarily mean in the physical sense. Obviously, I want to keep my pen roll, but also my pen roll and this brush and several of the other things that I'm using represent my creativity and my creative output. So those are things that I want to keep with me as well. I used a ukulele. I've actually been playing violin a lot more lately, but my ukulele represents musical output, musical creativity, and being active in music. I like to think of the items represented on this page a little like the objects that pharaohs were buried with in ancient Egypt, but in more of a optimistic and less death sense. So pharaohs were buried with objects that were meant to help them in the afterlife, whereas I am preserving through photographs and collage objects that I hope will help me this year and concepts that I hope will help me this year. So try to put some thought into what you want to collect for this page, what items you want to be represented, and what concepts they stand for. Now you can size down all of these objects on your computer and print them out on whichever printer you have access to. I'm printing mine directly to my HP Sprocket printer because it is quick and it is easy. Now, just as I cut a slot in my paper doll's hand, I'm going to do the same in my pen roll so that it will actually be functional and I can store my cutout scissors and my cutout paintbrush right there in the photo of the pen roll. I took a little glassine envelope from my box of collage materials and I'm using that to store all of my pieces here. Now we're getting a little more abstract. I'm going to use a hand-carved stamp of a ginkgo leaf. And for me that represents memory and presence of mind, which is definitely something I want to bring with me into 2019. Once I cut that out, it actually looks a little bit like a paper fan, which is super cool. I like that effect and it looks really neat when I have it held in my paper doll's hand. I cannot believe I forgot to include my traveler's notebook in all of those items. For me, my traveler's notebook represents not only memory and planning ahead, but it also represents daily art practice because that is where I am still maintaining my streak of art journaling every single day, 1 page a day. And I guess in a way it also represents travel, and that's something I definitely want to do more of in 2019, but hey, don't we all? I do already have my first trip booked for the year, going out at the end of April to New Jersey for the Girls Rock Camp Alliance conference, which is going to be so much fun. Now, if you're doing the same as me and using a portable thermal printer for all of these items, then you already know that the Polaroid Zip and the HP Sprocket and so on use a paper that has a sticker back to it. So I'm just leaving the wax paper backing on these stickers as I cut the pieces out, but I also think this would look super cool if you backed it onto a piece of watercolor paper with some painting on it or some other design or a piece of collage paper, whatever you want to do. Even patterned scrapbooking paper could look really cool. I just didn't want to do the extra time and the extra step in this video of cutting those shapes out again on other paper. So just like in week 2, I've got my custom collage material, and these are just watercolor swatches, and I'm going to write down some abstract concepts of things that I consider positive that I want to bring with me into 2019. So number 1 is determination. I have so many pieces of watercolor paper with these little swatches on them because I'm constantly testing my paper like, oh, how does it handle a flat wash? How does it handle a flat wash with this brush instead? And so on and so forth. So I don't usually throw them away because they do make really great backgrounds for things exactly like this. The next quality I want to bring with me into 2019 is stamina. This page is really the culmination of the previous 2 weeks of this course. We have a little bit of collage, we have a little bit of introspection and self-reflection in these pieces that are going into this collection. And that's one thing I really love doing, is using pieces of what we've already covered to make something completely new and unique. Like, this page doesn't look anything like the previous 2 pages, apart from sharing a little bit of the palette with last week's page. But it's a totally different concept, even though it uses the same skill set, the same tools. I'm bringing a lot of gratitude with me into 2019 because I'm at a pretty amazing place in my life right now. By the same token, I want to bring some contentment with me so that that sense of urgency from week 2 doesn't drive me crazy and I can sit back and pace myself toward my goals. I'm feeling pretty content about this page, and I think I have all the pieces I need. So now it's time to adhere these elements, and I'm going to start with that glassine envelope. For the paper doll, I do not want her glued down, on the chance that it would interfere with the hinged articulation, but also because I might want to take her out and use her in other projects as well. So I'm doing one simple stitch around the waist through the page just to hold her in place and keep her there inside the book, but make it so that I can always untie this thread and take her out if I need to. Once I have those holes poked with the needle, I'm coming through from the other side of the paper. And the nice thing about working with all these layers of collaged paper glued down is that it's very reinforced and it's not going to have any problem with tearing through, even though it's all vintage paper. To get this page into my art journal, I could certainly just glue the whole thing down on a whole page, but I didn't want to have the bulk of a regular page in my journal plus this sheet. So I'm actually going to cut out a page from my journal except for a gutter that's approximately 1.5 inches wide. And then I'm going to treat this page as a tip-in. I'm going to glue down this gutter and attach the page there. Once it's in place, we are just about finished. I really hope you've enjoyed this whole course, and if you do your own art journal pages based on these lessons, I hope that you'll tag them on social media with the hashtag #YourOwnImage so I'll be able to find them and see your work. Also, please remember to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much for watching.